I'd like to ask District 6 Councilman Sal DiCiccio to share his remarks. Councilman.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for being here today. I tell you, it's a great honor to be here. And I'd be remiss by not thanking my family. It's funny, when I got out the door this morning, my wife even turned to me. For those of you that know me pretty well know that I'm not big on wearing ties. I'm pretty direct, but I'm not big on wearing ties. My wife saw me, she goes, I didn't even have to ask you to put it on a tie today, Sal. I said, well, no, you didn't need to today. And Michael Nowakowski even hit me up on it and says, hey, are you really wearing a tie? I go, yeah, it must be a special occasion somewhere. But no, I do want to give some special thanks right off the bat if I could. You know, when you're involved in these campaigns, it's always rough, it's always tough, especially if you're taking the types of issues, some of the things that my office has been able to try to move forward at the City of Phoenix. And even though we're at the forefront, the people that are always the ones that bear the brunt of all the hard times are your family. So I thank God every day for my wife and my two children, Anna and Amelia, who you saw here today. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Anna. Where are you guys anyways? All right, there you are. Thanks. And for those of you that remember it last year, my two girls were only 5, but they were jumping up and down on the stage. They stole the show, and it was very appropriate. I thought it was very good, actually. And then I do want to give special thanks also to my mother and father. They couldn't make it here today. They're a little elderly, and it's very difficult sometimes getting out the door. But I've been very blessed in my life to have family like that. Both my parents came over from Italy. They had a struggle. I mean, for those of you that know me, we didn't have a whole lot of money when we grew up. We grew up kind of poor. My first language was Italian. And if you want to know where my persistence comes from, it really comes from my mom. Driving and driving and driving and driving to make sure that we always got ahead in life. And I thank God for my family, for everything that they've done for us. Then I also want to give special thanks here too. I mean, this is kind of exciting to be able to sit up here with Laura Pastor and Kate Gallegos and the other members of the council. But Laura's already hit the road running. I mean, boy, I'll tell you, she's already met with people. She's already figured out where her agenda is going to be going. And this is going to be an exciting time on this council. And Laura, congratulations for being here today. Kate Gallego, I mean, really, think of this. The Arizona Republic points out 14 people every single year, people that are going to be notable, ones that are going to be advancing, ones that are going to be moving the city and state forward. Kate was one of the 14. Congratulations, Kate. I mean, that's really, really cool to get something like that. That's usually reserved for congressmen and senators and people like that. And for those of you that kind of were always wondering where I was going on things, you always think of me as either like the food tax, property tax increases, or stopping that, or stopping the city from taking too much out of your pocket, working on domestic violence, working on making the city the best place in the country to do business. But it's more than that. It's always been more than that. It's literally about putting a plan in place that makes the city of Phoenix the most sustainable and viable place in the country that allows us to compete on a national and international level, making us smarter, better, faster than our competitors, because we're going to need those things in order to be able to compete in this new world economy. And so in order to do that, I need to walk you through just a little bit of history of why things were so difficult and why things were so hard at the very beginning, but they're starting to work through. And we've had, as taxpayers, incredible successes. But before I get into the successes, I need to walk us through the history of what occurred. And if you take a look, you go back in 2000 to 2009, that was the era of big government. We saw the city of Phoenix raise water rates and sewer rates combined about 89%. Big government created big problems when there was a hiccup in the economy. Now, I don't blame my predecessors. I don't do that. The idea then is, where are you going to go from there? Once you created that structure, you created a cultural change, you had to come back and change that culture. And to do that, when you've got momentum heading in one direction of 15,000 employees and an entire organization of $3.4 billion, to change the culture takes time. And it takes effort. And sometimes you have to kind of push a little harder than you'd normally do if you would in real life. I love my colleagues. I love everybody at the City of Phoenix. I think we got phenomenal employees. But pushing doesn't mean it's a bad thing. So if you look at what occurred from 2000 to 2009, we had to enter into an era of what? Big decisions. Mayor Gordon, others on the council, everybody worked hard, and these were the big decision points. Matter of fact, when I was put on the council and I won the election, A lot of people ask me, they said, are you sure you really want to go do this? Because normally these end political careers. They're not the positions you want to be in. But a city needs to have a direction. I felt, and I'm an optimist like you would never believe, I'm the most optimistic guy you'll ever find, that we could make these changes. The first 2 years definitely were hard. From 2009 to 2011, it was very difficult. We had some difficult things that started to occur in the city of Phoenix, but to change the direction, to change the culture, move us off this path that wasn't quite financially stable, but to move us on a financially stable path that allowed us to prosper and grow and improve our quality of life in the city of Phoenix. So in 2011, the first big breakthrough occurred because it was like literally every time we were doing something, we got stopped. It was like playing in a football game. Every time I tried to run the ball, boom, you got stopped there. Pass got stopped there. In 2011, I believe it was in March of 2011, was the first breakthrough. The city of Phoenix, for the first time that I can remember, had no increase in their sewer rates. Now, you think that that's kind of a small thing. It was big back then. It was huge. It was a big move. But then it got bigger. Working with Mayor Gordon, we ended up looking at trying to make the city of Phoenix the best place in the country to do business. Then the plan that Councilman Waring was just talking about was started then. Then you saw in the elections the reform packages that I was talking about and others were talking about wanting to get the city of Phoenix to move forward on were the highlight of the mayoral race. Now that was pretty cool on its own, but it created the momentum to move forward. Then the big game-changing moment occurred. And it's no slight on Brian or anyone else, but the real game-changing moment occurred when Councilman Jim Waring got put on the council. Because that is when the moment started to happen. That's when if you were to look at a football game and say, wow, now you could see where the team was going. You could see where the gap was going to be and where the individuals that were always constantly trying to block you, you were able to forecast 3, 4, 5, and 6 moves ahead of where they were and to be able to get those reforms. That's why the reform packages that we were looking at, before I talk about the reform package, I want to talk to you about how hard it was to get here because it was very difficult. But the game-changing moment was when he was put on the council. Now we saw the field. We were able to score, and taxpayers scored big. And let me walk you through that. And we had in place a plan, a 4-pillar plan, call it what you want, 4 strategies, but there are 4 parts of the plan that we had to get through. One, we talked about it earlier, was changing the culture of City Hall. How do you do that? You've got to make us operate like what? Your homes, your households. Government, remember from our economics classes, is inelastic. Where price and cost doesn't matter, we're a monopoly. So in order to make price and cost matter, you had to do what? Keep the taxpayers out of it, quit taking money out of their pockets, and create efficiencies and productivity internally. So in order to do that, you look at Councilwoman Thelda Williams, Michael Nowakowski, Bill Gates, and Jim Waring in particular. We have now 3 years in a row a combined water and sewer rate of 0. That is the first time in the history of the city of Phoenix that has occurred. That's not occurred. Matter of fact, most people can't remember the last time that we haven't had an increase in that. The food tax, that pesky food tax that everyone talks about. Year after year, we were told it could not be done, could not be done. You kept seeing these budgets about it not being able to get done. It wasn't until the breakthrough came in with Councilman Nowakowski and Councilwoman Thelda Williams were able to put together the plan in place that allowed it to happen where no cuts had to be made. Then you look at fee increases. No fee increases in the last 3 years in the city of Phoenix. Property taxes. There was a huge push, Councilman Gates, remember that? In order to raise the property tax rate, Councilman Gates, working with Councilman Gates, we stopped the property tax increase. So here's what's come out of that part of it. Remember, this is just the first of 4 pillars, 4 parts of the strategy. What occurred out of that, we have $89 million cut in government waste. We now have an employee base that is one of the most productive that we've ever had in the city of Phoenix, and we have the highest contingency fund of $43 million, more than we've ever had in the city of Phoenix. Those are the wins that the taxpayer had. But that was just part of it. At the same time you have to restructure internally, what do you have to do? You have to make sure you set in place the foundation that allows us to grow the economy. Government, no matter what anybody says, does not create jobs. It creates an environment for jobs to be created. So in place, working with Mayor Gordon and Tom Simplot, we were able to put in place the best model in the country for job creation. How do we do that? 24-hour permitting. You walk in today, you walk out with a permit. 24-hour inspections. You order an inspection today, you get an inspection tomorrow. 1-day, 5-day, and 21-day site plan approvals, the fastest in the country. If you look at just those two pillars alone, I challenge any city in the state, in the valley, in the country that has a plan as comprehensive as we do here in the city of Phoenix. But it went beyond that. The third pillar, the second pillar, is growing the economy, and we had to do that by streamlining, creating efficiencies. The third pillar is to create transparency within City Hall. Working with Councilwoman Thelda Williams, congratulations Thelda on this, we put together in place a true zero-based budget, which meant we have the highest transparency of any city in the country. Now we need to do more on transparency. We got to quit making these votes or these decisions in executive session that don't get outside, and they need to be public votes on those things. But we've made and created a foundation that allows us to move forward when it comes to transparency. But it also allowed us to move forward on what else? Being the best in the nation at things that we do, from answering the phone to even creating the best model when it comes to ending domestic violence. Thanks to Councilman Thelda Williams, Michael Nowakowski, Danny Valenzuela, and Jim Waring, we were able to put in place the best model when it comes to ending domestic violence. But these successes just don't end there. The fourth pillar, which is probably one of the most important pillars because they're all tied together. These things aren't independent upon themselves, they are interdependent upon each other. And the fourth pillar was creating an environment that fixes our long-term obligations. And you heard Councilman Waring talk about it earlier, but we just haven't gone far enough to do that. The idea is to get us off the path of Detroit. We are on that same path. Detroit, remember, had a $3.6 billion unfunded pension debt. The city of Phoenix, $2.4 billion. We don't have the money to pay for it, folks. We've got to create a model to do that. That's not going to happen here at City Hall. I'm going to be quite blunt about that because you also know I'm pretty direct. But that is going to have to be done through an initiative process. There are probably going to be two things that are going to need to happen. One, an initiative to get us off this current model, put us on the same model that the private sector has, that is financially stable for a long term for the city of Phoenix. And then the other is we have got to start paying down that unfunded pension debt. It is not fair to our children to leave them this enormous debt. If you look at the generation before me, and the generation before us, and the generation probably a lot before Laura and Kate, they're pretty young, but if you look at that generation, they never left us a problem. They never left us a problem. They left us a better world. What has our generation left our children? We've left them debt. We have an obligation to fix it for our children and not have to depend on them to have to do that. So the question is, where do we go from here? And I saw former Mayor Johnson in the audience. I believe Mayor Gordon, are you here too? They wrote a really nice, pretty letter. I don't know if you read about it in the Arizona Republic, but it talked about big ideas. Well, you can't just write something like that. You can't write these nice flowery things without expecting somebody to say, maybe you ought to do something about it too. I believe that there are 10 things that we can do to move the city of Phoenix forward and create a vision of big ideas, moving from an era of big government to the era that we are in right now of big decisions, transition out of those big decisions into an era of big ideas for the city of Phoenix. Move the city forward with big ideas. Use our former mayors, put them on committees, put them as head of areas in order to use those individuals. And here are some of the things that I think that we ought to be looking at and we ought to be moving forward. One, promote an education cluster downtown. If you look at what former Mayor Phil Gordon did, well, actually, former Mayor Skip Rimsa started the emphasis in downtown, and Phil Gordon hit it home, brought ASU downtown. But it's more than that. Now we should be looking at private sector universities. We should be looking at other types of schools. Look what the city of Mesa, Scott, I saw you here earlier. What they've done is gone out and look at private universities to bring in. Get away from the anchor mentality that ASU has been fantastic for the downtown. I love them. But now it's time to bring in other educational facilities into the downtown area. You have to, and I know it's different because I'm not part of the downtown in my district, but if you don't have a vibrant downtown, your core begins to crumble over time. You've got to maintain that vibrancy. And it was because of the vision and the things that the people did in the past that allowed this vision to occur. Create that core now, create it into a cluster. Number 2, push technology. And this is the city manager, Ed Zerker. We've been talking about this. But it's outside of just creating and looking at an assessment we do internally, Ed. Look at what we have on the outside. Don't look at just what we need as individuals or what our operations need. Look at what the community needs. Now, I know it doesn't make sense to have Wi-Fi throughout an entire city, but there could be pockets where we could assess the private sector in Wi-Fi pockets. Assemble individuals in our community from all walks of life, from the engineers that create these like neat things, I don't know what they would be called, but literally assemble those individuals throughout our community, leaders in technology that are able to put together a plan in place of not only what we need for our assessments internally, but what the community needs to be able to improve the quality of life within our city. The third thing is improve our quality of life. You haven't heard a whole lot in the debate, but we used to talk a lot about preserving our desert. Historic preservation became a highlight last year. We need to look at how we can preserve those assets, those things that made our city great. Focus again on desert preservation. It doesn't mean we always have to spend money to do that. You can provide incentives for people to do that through density transfers. Other ways where you encourage people to have open space, not just on desert preservation, but open space within central parts of Phoenix can be done if it's done through the zoning process. We can do that, and it doesn't necessarily always have to cost money to do that. The fourth, protect the rights of the individual, protect our taxpayers. One of the things, and it's as rudimentary as this, water rates, fee increases, property taxes, food tax, all those things matter. They matter to individuals. Keep that at bay. Quit looking to them to fund the activities. Let's look to ourselves first to create the efficiencies internally by growing the economy, and at the same time, which will bring in more revenue, long-term and short-term, but quit looking to the taxpayer for more money. Sixth, and Councilman Waring just talked about that, this city needs to be focused on helping those who cannot help themselves. We put together a plan in place, thanks to Councilman Williams, Michael Nowakowski, Danny Valenzuela, Jim Waring, and Councilman Johnson, that made the city the best place in the country to do business, the best place in the country for domestic violence, ending domestic violence. Councilman Jim Waring now is heading up a committee on sex trafficking. Now, for those of us that aren't as familiar at that, you've got 12 and 14-year-old kids enslaved and used for sex. That is wrong. Not in my city, not in my town, not in my state, and not with our children. That is what the motto needs to be for the city of Phoenix. It's not just about putting in place a plan for just the Super Bowl. Councilman Waring is now working on a plan long-term to make the city of Phoenix the best place in the country when it comes to sex trafficking. And he will be looking at places like Houston to find out what they've done. Mayor Stanton has worked on homelessness. He will put in place a plan, I believe this year, that will make the city of Phoenix the best in the country when it comes to dealing with homelessness. We already were able to save 56 individuals off the street. There are still thousands more that need our help. They need our assistance because they don't have that. That is what the city of Phoenix needs to focus on. And 7, and I'm almost done with this, but there's a lot that needs to be done here at the city. And for those of you that know, I fill my plate. It's bolster international trade. The city of Phoenix, and one of the things that Mayor Stanton wanted to push through was getting the city of Phoenix to have a true trade office. Not a consultant, but a true trade office in the country of Mexico. That is what we need. If we believe that our southern border, our southern trade is important to the city of Phoenix, then you know what? We better be committing resources to making that happen. But not just working to government, working with the private sector to increase foreign direct investments in the city of Phoenix. Number 8, make our citizens the #1 priority. We're going to be facing another budget situation in the city of Phoenix where we're going to have at least $40 million, if not $70 million more in revenue. In the past, the government employees, the government unions basically took all the money. The question now is, where is that money going to go? Is it going to go to improving our roads? Is it going to go to improving our homeless situation, domestic violence, putting more police officers on the street, putting more firefighters on the street? Or is it going to be going to what I believe the insiders at City Hall? I believe you deserve to be the #1 priority. You, the public, needs to be the #1 priority. Number 9, limit government to the areas where there are real problems. Limited government. Don't pass laws that impact so many people when in fact the focus is so narrow. We've seen this a couple times at the city of Phoenix where things could have been handled, but instead we passed laws. The city has basically passed laws that criminalize business activity, doing normal day-to-day business. That's not acceptable. That's not the city that I like. That's not the city that I live in. That's not the city that I adore so much. And finally, this is it. And you all know me really well, but the idea is, and you always know that I keep my promise. When you look at my children, they will tell you, if I said, hey, look, does Daddy say something, and does Daddy do it? They'll say, yes, he always does what he says. Likewise, the city of Phoenix made a commitment when the voters passed a bond issue several years ago. They wanted us to commit those dollars to those bonds. The city of Phoenix called it a deferment, but basically it was a cut of over $150 million to $200 million. Cut those citizen bond approved projects because it was taking the money from those projects and using it for other things. That is not the city that I live in. That is not the city that I want to see to be able to move the city of Phoenix forward. Bring us back to protecting the rights of those taxpayers that voted for those bonds. Put the bond program back in place, even if it means that it has to be done slowly, but start putting it back in place. And then I'll end with this. I appreciate everything, and I appreciate my colleagues. They do a fantastic job. But when I go into working with you, and they all know this, I don't represent them. I love them. I love our employees. I love the mayor. You may not think I do, but I do like them, okay? But I do like them. There's no one I don't like, pretty much. Well, maybe one or two. those pesky union guys that were putting my wife on TV, didn't like that too much. But the bottom line is this, is that when I go into a room, I represent the taxpayer. I represent you. I don't represent anyone else. I represent you. I will continue that commitment that I made to you in 2009. And I will continue the commitment on real reform. And none of these things were done by one person. They were done because we worked it as a team. All these accomplishments that I listed were done because we worked as a team. Thank you very much. God bless.